That day, we didn't encounter the trench coat woman, presumed to be the middle-aged woman, rumored around school. Nor did we the next day, or the day after. However, whispers about the woman in the trench coat persisted at school. On the 5th day of walking home together with Shin, we decided to visit June again, bringing with us some orange jelly desserts from our school lunch as a gift. Upon arriving at June's house and ringing the bell, his aunt, as always, greeted us warmly and let us in. Jun was still lacking his usual energy. The rash had mostly faded, but he himself said, "The face on my side is getting bigger day by day." Shin and I couldn't see any difference. If anything, it seemed better than when we last saw him. It must have been a psychological shock for Jun. We didn't mention the ongoing rumors about the woman in the trench coat to Jun. As we were leaving, Jun's aunt chased after us, asking with a concerned look, "Is Jun being bullied at school?" We denied it, but felt a bit guilty for not being able to tell her the real reason. 3 days later, unusually, Naito, Sasaki, Shin, and I walked home together. Naito was large-bodied, and Sasaki was short, resembling live-action versions of Jian and Tsuneo. The matter of the middle-aged woman had started to fade from mine and Shin's concerns. The school's rumors about the woman in the trench coat, even if true, seemed to be about someone entirely different by then. That day, the 4 of us decided to go to the station front to play with gachapon machines, taking a different route than usual. That was our mistake. As we walked and chatted happily, Sasaki pointed out, "Isn't that the trench coat woman?" Naito exclaimed, "Whoa, for real, that's creepy." I looked at the trench coat woman, hoping in my heart she was someone else. The woman, holding a supermarket bag in one hand, stood motionless on the still hot asphalt road, looking down, her expression unreadable. Shin, perhaps cautious, whispered to us not to make eye contact. As we gradually closed the distance with the woman, tension mounted. She remained motionless, just looking down. When we were about 5 meters away, she suddenly lifted her face and stared at us, then glanced at our chests, presumably checking our name tags. I panicked, struggling to maintain my composure. A flashback to that day's events made my heart feel like it was about to burst out. There was no mistake. It was the middle-aged woman. I walked past her looking down, terrified of being attacked at any moment. It felt like an eternity, though only a few seconds had passed. Naito laughed. "Did you see her eyes? She's totally lost it." Sasaki mocked. "Who wears that in this heat?" Shin and I couldn't laugh. Sasaki continued. "Crap. Did she hear that? She's still looking." I instinctively looked back. Our eyes met with the middle-aged woman's. Her face, emotionless like a wax figure, twisted into a vile, sneering smile. That's what it means to feel a chill down your spine. For the first time in my life, I was so scared I almost wet myself. Had she recognized me? If she had, why hadn't she attacked? My mind raced with these thoughts. Naito joked, "Wow, she's still looking this way. Sasaki, she must have heard what you said. I don't know anything about it." Gachapon was the last thing on our minds. Once we turned a corner and the woman was out of sight, I grabbed Shin's arm and said, "Let's go home." Shin looked into my eyes for a moment before agreeing. Got cram school today, right? Better head back." And we ran. We ran in the opposite direction of home, and after a while I told Shin, "It's her! Those eyes, unmistakable. She's come looking for us." Shin, surprisingly calm, replied, "She really was checking out our name tags. With June's drawstring bag, our grade and class are out in the open." Irritated by Shin's composure, I snapped, "What do we do now? We can't run forever. She'll find out where we live eventually." Shin said, "Let's go to the police. This can't go on. We need help." I was silent for a while, realizing we had no other option for salvation. But what do we tell the police? Shin suggested, "The mountain. We'll take photos of the nailed photo, Happy and Touch's bodies, and show them as evidence that she's a menace. The police should be able to catch her then." I agreed, though I dreaded returning to that mountain, but we had no choice. We decided to go to the mountain right after school the next day. Agreeing to head to the mountain after school the next day, we set off for home, taking a long detour to avoid any chance encounter with the middle-aged woman. A journey normally taking 20 minutes took us 2 hours. Upon reaching home, I immediately called Shin. "Do you think she knows where we live? What if she comes tonight?" I never thought I'd be this fearful. Understanding why Jun was mentally disturbed from having his name revealed, and the Jun curse kill carved into the cabin made sense. Shin reassured me, "It'll be fine. She won't find out that quickly." At that moment I realized, although I always saw us as equals, Shin was more like a brother to me. Needless to say, I couldn't sleep that night. Startled by the slightest noise, closing my eyes only to see the sneering face of the middle-aged woman imprinted on the inside of my eyelids. Morning came, and after school at 3:30 p.m., Shin and I arrived at the entrance to the mountain. I hesitated to enter. The middle-aged woman, the transformed bodies of Happy and Touch, the countless nails, all vividly came back to me, recalling that night's events. I looked to Shin, who silently stared at the mountain. He must have been scared too. "I really don't want to go in," I hoped he would say. Contrary to my hopes, Shin pulled out an instant camera from his pocket, gripped it in his right hand, and muttered, "Okay," before quickly starting to run into the mountain. I ran after him, pulled by his determination. Shin didn't look back, running straight on. I chased desperately, terrified of being left alone. Looking back, Shin must have been scared too. That's probably why he ran without looking around. As we approached that place, unwanted memories of that night vividly returned, spreading fear in my heart. When my legs began to freeze with fear, we reached that place, the spot where the middle-aged woman had nailed things, where she had killed Happy and Touch, where I had been dragged down, the place where we encountered the middle. Suddenly feeling watched, I looked around. It wasn't someone. I felt watched by the middle-aged woman. The mountain's silence and the fear spreading in my heart synchronized, causing my legs to tremble. Without concern for me stopping, Shin approached that tree. Noticing something, Shin crouched down. Happy. At his word, I forgot about my trembling legs and walked over to him. Happy was almost part of the soil, his skull exposed with a slightly rusted nail still stuck in it. I was about to pull out the nail when Shin said, "Wait," and took a photo. Surprised by Shin's calmness, I tried again to pull out the nail. The moment I touched the nail stuck in the skull, countless unseen bugs burst out. Ugh! I hastily retracted my hand and stood up. The sight of the swarming tiny insects was too frightening, and I couldn't bring myself to approach Happy's body any further. Instead, I felt nauseous and gagged. Shin quietly patted my back without saying a word. I had abandoned Happy that night, and now again I had left him behind. I was utterly weak and despicable. Shin stood up, aimed the camera again, and prepared to photograph that tree. "Hey, come here!" Discovering something, Shin called me over. I cautiously approached, and he pointed at something. "This wasn't here before, right?" he pointed out. Looking where he pointed, I saw countless nailed photos. Huh? I thought there were photos last time, too. No, the photos were different. To be precise, the photo of a 4 or 5-year-old girl we saw before was beside it, meaning more photos had been added. Judging by the state of the new photos, they were nailed here in the last 2 or 3 days. The photo we saw before had deteriorated so much from the rain and wind that it was hard to tell if it was a girl. The new photo also seemed to be of a 4 or 5-year-old girl. I didn't tell Shin, but for a moment I panicked, thinking, what if the new photo is of me? Shin took photos of the nailed photos, and then said, "Let's photograph the carvings at the secret base," and ran off again. The illusion of the middle-aged woman being nearby made me fear being alone, so I hurriedly followed Shin. As we approached the secret base, I felt something was off and called out, "Shin!" That feeling, the roof of the secret base, which should be visible from here, wasn't in sight. Shin seemed to realize it too. At that moment, the thought of the middle-aged woman crossed my mind. A sense of foreboding. My heartbeat accelerated. Shin suggested, "Let's go through the back path." I nodded silently. The back path meant a route different from the traditional one, going through the bushes to reach the back of the secret base, created in case enemies attacked the base during our games. Though intended for play, I never imagined it would come in handy like this. If the middle-aged woman was at the base, this route would significantly reduce the chance of being spotted. Crawling on all fours, Shin and I slowly made our way through the tunnel of bushes. When we were about 5 meters away from the back of the secret base, the reason for the anomaly became clear. The base was destroyed. Our secret base, built up by the 3 of us and the 2 dogs, was reduced to mere lumber. After observing for a while and sensing no sign of the middle-aged woman, we emerged from the bushes to the site of the secret base. Seeing the secret base in ruins, we were close to tears. The secret base, in a way, was another home for us three and the two dogs. In a corner among the debris lay a large stone, likely used by someone to smash the base. Someone? No, probably the middle-aged woman. Shin silently began taking photos, then flipped a few pieces of wood to reveal the board carved with Jun curse kill and photographed it. Then, from a slight gap between the boards, flies emerged, revealing Touch's body. Happy and Touch. We felt the irreplaceable loss of the two dogs even more than the secret base. Standing up, Shin said, "Let's quickly develop these photos and take them to the police." We ran down the mountain, heading straight to a police box near the station. The photos in this camera will get the middle-aged woman caught. We'll be saved. That was our sole focus as we ran. We stopped by a photo shop on the way to request development. Told it would take 30 minutes. We waited inside the shop. There was barely any conversation between Shin and me during that time. We were just eagerly waiting for the photos. After 30 minutes passed, "Your order is ready." We were called over by a female clerk who seemed to be a part-timer. Eagerly, Shin and I headed to the register. The clerk, with a puzzled expression, handed us an envelope filled with the developed photos, saying, "Here are your photos. Please check them inside." Well, it was only natural for her to look puzzled, considering the photos were solely of a dog's corpse and a girl with nails pierced through her photo. Shin immediately pulled out the photos from the envelope to check them all, then said, "Everything's fine, thank you," and paid the fee. We left the store and headed straight to the police station. This would end everything. We burst into the police station at the front of the station. "What's up?" A young police officer greeted us with a smile. Approaching him, we pleaded, "Please help us." Shin and I recounted the events of that night, showing him the photos as proof, and explained that we were still being targeted by the middle-aged woman. After our story, the officer, still with a calm demeanor, asked, "Have you told your parents?" When we said we hadn't, he asked, "Can you give me your home phone number?" Shin, getting somewhat irritated, blurted out, "Why do our parents matter? We're the ones being targeted." For context, both of Shin's parents are in the medical field, and his older brother is a student at a renowned private high school. Among the three of us, Shin's family is the wealthiest but also the strictest. If it came out that we had lied to our parents about going to the secret base and got involved in such situation, not just Jun and me, but Shin would be in serious trouble. "Help us, you're a police officer." Shin pressed the officer, who gave a wry smile and said, "You guys are elementary students, right? You really should tell your parents about this kind of thing." This back and forth continued for a while. Eventually the officer asked, "So what's the name of your homeroom teacher?" This felt like a threat to us. From the officer's perspective, he probably needed to hear the story from our guardians or responsible adults. But to us, parents and teachers were merely figures to be scolded by. As we went on, a sense of mistrust towards the officer started to grow within us. We thought, if we stay here, they'll force us to give our address and snitch to our parents. I guess he doesn't believe our story. Despite our desperate pleas for help, he kept mentioning parents and teachers. We even brought evidence photos to prove the existence of the middle-aged woman. I showed the officer the photos again, insisting, "This is how the dog was killed." Then the officer took the photos, fell silent for a moment, and said something unexpected. Is this supposed to be a dog?" Shin and I were taken aback. What was he talking about? He continued, "I'm not saying I don't believe you. Can you explain a bit more? This is the head, right?" The officer wasn't joking. He genuinely seemed confused. I picked up Happy's photo and started to explain, but then stopped, speechless. Indeed, looking at this photo objectively, it might not look like a dog's corpse. The bones had discolored to a light brown, with only a few patches of fur remaining. Since Shin and I had seen Happy's body the day after he died, even though decomposition had progressed, we knew its original form, the way it had fallen, its appearance. But to someone unaware, it might just look like a dirty stone with a rag wrapped around it. I calmly looked through the other photos again. The board carved with Jun curse kill, the girl's photo with countless nails. It was indeed difficult to directly link these to the middle-aged woman's existence. Perhaps the officer thought this was elementary school mischief and kept mentioning parents and homeroom teachers for that reason. I started to feel it was dangerous to stay here. They're definitely planning to call our parents. I whispered to Shin. He nodded silently, gave a quick nod as a signal to leave, and then suddenly turned and ran. I followed suit immediately, dashing out of the police station. We heard the officer call out, "Hey!" from behind, but we didn't look back and kept running. There was no sign of the officer chasing us. He probably thought elementary school kids who came to prank got scared of being caught and ran away. Shin and I made sure the officer wasn't following and sat down on the roadside for an emergency meeting. What do we do now? What should we do? We were at a loss. Even the police, our last resort, hadn't believed us, and we were left without a way to protect ourselves from the middle-aged woman. We thought this would solve everything. The disappointment was immense because we had convinced ourselves that this would be the end.